Okay, let's get into this real quick. It is an early morning. All right, so here's the bottom line. We have to go through this kind of secret situation that nobody really talks about in the Social Security circles. It's talked about mostly in the financial circles, accounting circles, tax circles, corporate circles, but it's not talked about in the Social Security circles. Let me go through it real quick. If you go ahead and stop working at a much younger age, study after study after corporate study shows that you will very likely pass away much earlier. Now, from a Social Security perspective, they're constantly trying to have people wait to go ahead and collect retirement benefits farther down the line. The reason why is that a lot of people will go ahead and pass away before they can collect as much at the higher rate, which means that SSA has to pay out less benefits over the rest of that person's life. Now, here's an interesting thing to think about. If somebody goes on disability benefits and they stop working earlier, the statistics for that person to likely pass away at a much younger age dramatically increase. Here are some of the classic quotes that relate to this particular study and the many studies that have been done on this particular topic. Retire at 55, die at 60. Retire at 65, die at 83. The data is brutal. The earlier you retire, the earlier you die. Retirement can be hazardous to your health. That was Dr. Engelman. Every year you delay retirement adds about 6 to 9 months to your life expectancy. Quote, the healthiest thing you can do for your longevity is keep working past 65. Quote, idleness is the deadliest part of retirement. That was attributed to the Boeing study. Quote, if you retire early, the actuarial tables say you'll be dead a lot sooner than your coworkers who kept showing up. Quote, work keeps people alive, retirement kills. Quote, the Boeing chart should scare the FIRE movement to death, literally. Quote, the data shows that having a reason to get out of bed in the morning is more powerful than how much money you have. All right, now let's go through some of the basics on this situation. If you were to go ahead and look at the retirement mortality chart, which is basically this chart that's kind of secretly talked about in the Social Security circles under the covers, but never really brought forward, never advertised, never talked about at all. The retirement mortality chart is where somewhere around, remember this comes from a 2005 Boeing employee study. Now, if you go ahead and retire somewhere around 55, you will likely pass away around 59.8 years. 56, retirement, 61.1 age at death. 57, retirement, 62.5 age of death. 58 to 64, 59 to 65, 60 to 67, 61 to 68.5, 62, 70.2, 63 retirement, you live to 71.8, 64 retirement, you live to 73.5, 65 retirement, you live to 75.5, and 66 plus retirement, you live to 78 to 80 years old plus. So what happens is basically there's a little secret to this in the Social Security field. If people go on disability benefits, the likelihood that they will pass away sooner rather than later significantly increases. Now, the kicker to that, the offset to that, is the data that's being shared from the SSA, which is that, these people who are on disability benefits at a younger age are on it for a very long time because they still live a while. And so if you look at the statistics of how much is spent on a person who's receiving a check for, let's say, decades, you're still ... spending a lot of money versus somebody who's getting disability right before they switch over to retirement benefits. So let's do a quick calculation, nothing special, some easy peasy math. Let me get that calculator up. Let's see what we got here. Calculator. All right, let me pull this up. Let's say that somebody, well, actually, what is right now? What is the national average? What is the national average for disability SSDI check amount? Okay, let's see what this comes out to. So it's like $1,500, $1,600, like pointing to roughly $1,588. All right. So if you take $1,588, okay, and you multiply that by 12, right? Okay, so $1,588 multiplied by 12. That's 1 year, and you're looking at $19,056. Now, let's say that this person is found disabled somewhere in, let's say 30-year-old. and they're only going to live to 60. They're only going to live to 60, okay? Let's multiply that by 30, okay? That total amount that came from the government disability trust fund, $571,680 paid out over 30 years. That doesn't seem like a lot of money because it's a 30-year period, but it is also $500,000. Now, if you were to go ahead and take that same person who's basically, and keep in mind, somebody who hasn't worked that long, they could be getting a higher amount if they earned a lot more in those years with, using the 35-year averaging algorithm. But let's say we get the same amount. So we're doing, again, $1,588, okay? But the person becomes disabled when they're 59, okay? So let's say $1,588 and they're 59. So you got, let's just say they're found disabled on January 1st of 59 years. We're making the math easy here. So you got 59, 60, 61, 62, 63, 64, 65, 66, 67. So we got 9 months here, right? So, okay, so now we multiply that by 12. So 1,588, that's what they get per month times 12. That gets us our year figure, right? And now we go ahead and we multiply that times 9. That totals $171,504. So basically, somebody found disabled in SSDI benefits, simple math here, would get over $500,000, $570-ish thousand over the span of their life from the SSDI program, if they live that long. Okay, these reports are saying they won't live that long because when somebody doesn't go to work, they just don't live as long. Christine Gagnon, thank you for the $1 donation. Very good to see you. I got to catch up with you. Very, very cool. Let me put a little heart on that. Very good. Excellent. So that means that if somebody is 59 years old, found disabled January, and technically you wouldn't count that month for benefits, but if you technically did it, they'd have to be essentially 58 years old and essentially, December 15th, found disabled. Then the next month they would begin. That's technically how you'd have to do the math. But again, easy math, easy, fun math. So if you had a 30-year-old who lived, basically to 60-ish, $570,000. Massive hit to the Social Security Disability Trust Fund. But if you had a 59-year-old before they went to retirement at 67, they'd only take out $171,504. So at the end of the day, just to be clear, right, it is economically smart for the SSA to find people disabled that are older. It's just better math for keeping the trust fund solvent. It is not good math for finding people disabled that are kids that will likely transition into adults and still receive a disability check. Those are extremely expensive, and here's why. Those kids will usually go from SSI, and then if they can do a little bit of work, they might be able to attach to SSDI, but many of those children get onto what's called disabled adult child benefits. Now that's where they get to tap into their parents' SSDI benefit, their parents' Title II benefits. So they get to tap into their parents' retirement trust fund kind of benefits, where they get to grab money from what their parents would normally, be able to access. Now it doesn't take away from their parents and how much they would get, but it does allow them to tap into that larger earning potential. And we have the rule like that because we want people who can't work between 18 and 22, who are disabled between 18 and 22, for the most part, right? Some of them do a little bit of work. We want them to be able to have a check that makes sense. Because, if they're being found disabled at that young age, it's either SSI for the rest of their life, or maybe a bit more because they can access their parents' benefits to some degree. So at the end of the day, if you have somebody being found disabled that's a DAC, disabled adult child claim, boy, those add up a lot. They take a lot of money from the system. So as a result of that, this key study, right, this 2005 Boeing study basically found, let me give you the extremes again, at 55 years retirement, you will pass away likely at 59.8. At 66 plus year retirement, you will pass away likely at 78 to 80. Okay. Now, there was also a Shell Oil study, 2015 to 2016, where basically they found employees who retired at 55 died by around 60 years old on average. And those who retired at 60 died around 70 years old. And those who retired at 65 died around 83 years old. Now, there was also an Australian study, 1980s to 2000, government employees. Men who retired at around 60 via early retirement programs had around 2 to 4 years shorter life expectancy than those who kept working until 65 to 67. Now, you have to take into effect that the people who are retiring early usually retire early because they get medical conditions. They don't talk about that with a lot of this stuff. As a disability attorney, I see that all the time. So, what you have to understand is this: if somebody's retiring at 60, if somebody's stopping work at 55, it's usually because of a medical condition. It's not because of what most financial experts would automatically see in their eyes as the reality. The reality that they see is, oh, they earned enough, they don't have to work anymore. That's not how it works anymore. People work their entire life and then have to work through retirement while they're still paying off their student loans, which is insanity. But the point I'm getting at is this, okay? At the end of the day, if somebody goes ahead and stops working at 55, the likelihood of trauma to the body, a car accident, some sort of cancer issue, some sort of other problem arising, very high, very, very high. There was a recent large-scale research, basically, trying to, correct certain biases. It was a Dutch study, 2018, published in a journal of epidemiology and community health. So each extra year of work before retirement was associated with around 4 to 6 weeks of increase in remaining life expectancy, even after controlling for health and wealth. So they took into consideration, did they have enough money? They took into consideration, did they have good health when they went into it? Oregon State University 2022, delaying retirement by 6 to 12 months, reduced mortality risk by 10 to 15% in the following years. A 2023 meta-analysis, International Journal of Epidemiology, of 17 studies found that on average, retiring at 65 plus adds roughly 1 to 3 years of life compared to retiring at 55 to 60. So even when they took into like the two bias factors, the person's not doing so great, they're sick, and the person has enough money versus they don't have enough money to retire, they found that still people lived longer. Now, I want to make sure that you understand another bias, which is important. Some people, right, they never wanted to work. They had to go work, but they never wanted to work. And then, some people never even work. They can work, but they don't. And that's the whole big, beautiful bill, able-bodied Trump changes. So you've got this situation where you have, people who like to work. It is my belief that people who like to work do live longer. Now, you have to remember that is for jobs that allow you to work harder. If you are a stonemason, a concrete guy, and I say guy, I'm not going to go into the woke thing because, most people who do concrete, although I'm sure you'll know a Sally out there that does it, but most people that do concrete are guys, right? If you're doing, pouring, if you're doing wall, if you're doing block, you're a guy. You know what I mean? So the bottom line is, heavy tree cutting, Alaska, stuff like that. Tile jobs, and I don't mean the cutesy kitchen tile jobs. I mean like, commercial tile jobs. You have to understand that they're not going to live as long. No matter what you do, no matter what you say, no matter what you feel, they're not going to live as long because their bodies are super beat up. At the end of each day, they're usually grabbing a beer and they're trying to just go ahead and fall asleep and then wake up and then rinse, repeat. My point with all this, structurally, is that the life you have on this planet is largely dictated by the job you do. If you do a job where you are constantly physically out in the field, right, you're going to get beat up. Sun's going to hit you, radiation. And a lot of people are like, no, there's not. No. If you look at the studies of individuals that basically have to work outside, some of them actually have more capacity to take on radiation than others from the sun. Some people go out in the sun and they feel sick at the end of the day. Some people go out in the sun and they feel amazing. Where's my drink? But that's because some people do better with the sun's radiation than others. Okay. There's also overheating of the body, swelling of internals, all that kind of jazz. So what you have to understand with this is that if people pass away sooner, if they go ahead and retire sooner, then you have to consider all these little tiny factors that are going to play into it. But I will say this: the majority of Americans have passed out of, the period of America where they were like in a mine, where they were like, working on warehouse manufacturing, textile raw material floors and processing things down a line. A lot of Americans, a lot of younger people, especially millennials and younger, tend to have jobs that involve a computer. More time you spend in front of a computer, you're probably going to go ahead and live longer. However, I'm going to share with you something that I have noticed that kind of skews this information and makes it a little bit problematic. I have noticed that the children of extremely wealthy people who grow up, they're in their 30s, 40s, 50s, whatever. But the children of extremely wealthy people have a significantly higher likelihood of death by their own choice. Why is that? Well, if you grow up and you don't have any fire to be able to survive, your body will tend to put your mind in a weird place. And I have noticed, and I've known a lot of very wealthy people, Christian communities, Jewish communities, etc., where their kids, when they give them, and this is the thing that a lot of wealthy people don't really tell others. Wealthy people will try to get their kids to be excited about something, go work in the industry, go work at some job, go learn the field, get involved, right? Because if you don't get involved, what's the life? So anyways, basically, they'll get them out there, they'll get them working, etc. Now, some of those kids, because they've never actually felt the fear of being kicked out of their apartment, the fear of not having food, because you couldn't afford it, because you couldn't earn enough that week. A lot of them have never had that fear in them, that survival instinct to go ahead and push harder, live longer, stay a little bit longer. On contrast to the wealthy kids who don't have that push feeling in them, you have basically the parents who are working a job to be able to afford things for their kids. Those people, for a very large chunk of their life, to be able to afford and pay for their children while they're growing up, and then even after that, get nice things for their kids, yada, yada. Those people tend to, I've noticed, have this instinctual desire to get more, earn more for a greater purpose. Now, the problem in society, which is why I think, honestly, people are not going to live as long in the future, which is kind of a scary thing to say. The problem with society that I see is that at the end of the day, we are going to see the amount of people who are childless, men and women getting together, having kids, etc. Right? The amount of people that are going to be childless is going to rocket upwards. And to be fair, having a child in the modern day marketplace of America, it'll probably get better because Trump is doing a lot of stuff that will make it better. But having a child in the modern day marketplace is extremely expensive, not just in the sense of the actual medical facility and stuff like that. The upbringing, the paying for the food, paying for the clothing, paying for the shoes, paying for the academia, paying for the this, paying for the that, extra trips to go places, right? They got to do sports, they got to do karate, they got to do taekwondo, whatever. So the problem is that having children is becoming a luxury in America, which is not good, because then the purpose feeling, the like, I'm waking up to do this with my child, I'm waking up to achieve this for my child, is disappearing. When that disappears, I expect the life expectancy of a lot of humans to start to go down. And they could just stay the same. They could be stagnant, but that means they're going down because people every year are expected to live longer, especially around 1910 to 1920. That's when it really starts getting kicked off. That's where people start living significantly longer every decade. So the kicker with this is that if basically you have a significant amount of people who are not feeling that need to survive for their children, because we're going into a very weird spot. And the weird spot is there's so many people, it's especially the Caucasians. There's so many people, and a lot of that is because the men are going more Republican and the women are going more woke. So you have a lot of white females who have woke ideology and a lot of white males now who believe in like more Republican tendencies. Should a firearm be used to protect my family? Probably yes. And the females on the woke side would say guns are evil, you know? And so you get back and forth with this. And I get crap sometimes because I have a little list of things that I would require from a partner. And that's at the top of the list. My partner will have to have training and own a sidearm, concealed carry, that stuff, because I'm not always going to be around and she might have the child. And if somebody tries to attack them, could be because of this show, could be because of whatever, then she has to have the ability and capacity to defend herself. And some of you will say, what do you mean? Why would she ever be attacked? Oh my goodness. Well, I don't know if you know, but this country has now brought in significant amounts of individuals from other cultures who attack, who abuse, who rape other, women that are in this country. The statistics for that are wild. They are wild, absolutely wild. Now, is it that person's skin color? Is that person's gender? No, it's that person's culture that they brought over from places like Haiti, Somalia, some parts of South America, etc., where there's that aggressive nature and people do these crimes and it's just part of their thing. Now, you might say, well, no, those are just bad people from those areas. You can argue whatever you want to argue, but the statistics of the amount of crimes they're going up. It's not good. And if you look at places where they also brought these immigrants over, right, into, let's say London to, basically Ireland to Sweden to whatever, it's very clear that the same thing is happening over and over. So at the end of the day, the ability of somebody to live longer is very directly related to their ability to have children, raise the children, care about the children, and then also have purpose through that job. But what I have found is that if somebody has purpose to work and they continue to work, they live much longer. I want to split that into two particular items here. Number one, if somebody likes to work on stuff, what do I mean? Hobbies, or they have their own business or whatever, right? And if they're, overstressing themselves, they will pass away earlier. But if they enjoy what they do and they keep doing yada, yada, they will live a very, very, very long time, a very long time. However, if ... somebody absolutely hates their job, they're miserable, they don't want to do it, they don't really want to work themselves, they've had to work, they'll usually pass away sooner. I have seen that time and time and time again. The people who want to be on Earth for some reason, the people who want to, partake in the human experiment, they just live longer. However, they have to also have a life that isn't full of certain stresses. Now, of course, if you put a giant, massive smog emitting factory next to their house, they'll die sooner. If you, for example, have them in a high congestion area where they go on a highway that has the most accidents on planet Earth, they'll probably pass away sooner. If you constantly feed them these foods that have a bunch of chemicals that have been basically banned in Europe, they'll probably pass away sooner, So I just want to go ahead and show you this because I think it's interesting. But ultimately, at the end of the day, there is a summary as to what realistically will happen if you retire early. So if you retire at 55, you'll probably live 5 to 10 more years. If you retire at 60, you'll probably live 10 to 15 more years. 62, 15 to 20 years, 65, 18 to 23 years, 67 to 70, 20 to 27 years longer. And that's just amazing to me because at the end of the day, you would always think that people who retire later in life would pass away sooner, but they don't. It's the opposite. It's the people who retire early that usually pass away, even if they have the money or they don't have the money. Even if they have their health or don't have the health, they always pass away sooner. Now, to keep that in mind, some people, when they get, past the traditional retirement mark, they have like other types of stuff that keeps them alive longer. Part-time work, consulting work, starting a small business, right? You got volunteering, you got teaching, mentoring, coaching, caring for grandchildren. You got board members, nonprofit leadership. You got competitive hobbies, creative pursuits, geographic locations you want to travel to. RVing is a good one. Basically having a secondary career, being active in a religious or spiritual, facility, house of worship, places like that. Those things tend to create the outcome that you will live longer. Now, I want to go through some additional things. If you look at Social Security, Okay. They tend to go ahead and create a bunch of rules in Republican era that are trying to get people to go back to work. You become retired and the Republicans get in, and then they're cutting taxes or giving a $6,000 rebate to those who are older, right? In the retirement field. What I've noticed about Democrats and Republicans when it comes to retirement and old people, Democrats, I used to think always were the definitive angle for essentially being the good, the moral high ground, the force of nature for pushing forward and making the program better. I used to feel like that was always the Democrats, always. But I'm now starting to believe more independents slash Republicans are actually for that. And here's my logic why. If you want somebody to live longer, you have to inspire them to work longer. That's retired people. If you want disabled to live longer, you have to make their food better, healthier. You have to make more medical options available. You have to force the pharmaceuticals to release different types of pills, release different types of other things as well. So, for example, let me give you let's say that there's some sort of surgery or some sort of biomarker or some sort of, special CRISPR protein, thing that they can do to get rid of some virus, bacteria, fungus, some sort of developing chromosome issue, whatever. The whole point here is that at the end of the day, I don't think the Democratic Party has really delivered on what a lot of their promises were. And if I go back to basically, looking at the strategic changes that have occurred, and I look at what JFK is doing, I saw in that hearing Democrats just tear at him. But it wasn't actually stuff that was relevant to, in my opinion, him doing what he needed to do, which is basically looking at what Europe did, all the products that Europe made illegal, all the things and the chemicals that Europe put into foods versus what we allow to put in foods. And we allow our companies in America, these giant food corporations that exist worldwide, to basically put a lot of poisons into our body. And as a result of that, he's getting to them to voluntarily, or he's changing laws to restrict, or he's whatever. And then we get better food. And now a lot of you, I don't know if you've ever been to Europe. I've been to Europe as part of the law school program to study abroad. Otherwise, who can afford it? But point is, I went to Europe and the food was very different. And it was a lot better. It's just a lot better. You could eat a lot and you just wouldn't get fat. You know what I mean? It's weird. Real quick, Curie3938, thank you for the $2 donation. Also a member, which is absolutely amazing. Howdy, very good to see you. Also, let's see, we got NLI10me, a $2 donation. Let me put a big heart there as well. I super duper appreciate that. That's awesome. Super thank you. So the big thing that I want to point out is that for disabled and retired people to be happier, healthier, better, live longer, they have to have part-time work, right? They will live longer if they have part-time work, or a family to interact with. There's a lot of retired people who don't talk to their family, which is not good. There also needs to be more modern approaches to cures, not just we're going to upkeep you with pills, but actual cures. We're seeing countries that we think of as third world countries literally now coming out with some type of cure for something that we don't even have in America. And so that's pushing forward the agenda of America having to release cures to be competitive against these other nations. What I believe is going to happen is that the pharmaceutical companies are going to shrink in how much financial profit they get because of the Trump administration. He's basically putting it on them a bit. But you have to remember, pharmaceuticals, big tech, right? Food industry, these are some of the greatest investors and politicians. Put it another way, they're some of the greatest bias operators out there. What I hope to see coming forward from the Democrats a bit more, I really do hope to see this. What I hope to see coming forward from the Democrats in the future is a future where they return to their base fundamentals, making sure that the poor are okay, making sure that the disabled are okay, making sure that the retired have what they need. They've become the party of immigrants. They've become the party of violence. They've become the party of anti-middle class. They've become the party of basically cultural revolution, except it's not leading us into a direction where people are happy. It's like erasing whatever culture America was, where literally you have people who are so woke that they will walk up to Caucasians and tell them that they have no culture. Um, and if you're not sure if they do, maybe look at the history of Britain, history of Europe, history of just look up so many things, so many things. And so what's weird is that there's this kind of like a Holocaust approach to the original culture of, and there's so many, so many whites that basically made stuff and now it's being replaced, being removed. That was like the weirdest thing for me. Weirdest thing for me is I was taught with the traditional methods of academia, classical school models. I was taught the classical school models, right? And by and through that, I definitively thought that white people were just everywhere and that there were zillions of them. Like they were just everywhere. There's so many white people all over the earth, everywhere, right? And then I looked it up and it turns out there's twice as many black people as white people on planet Earth. There's twice as many. So this ideology that white people are just these terrible overlords and they're everywhere and they control everything, that's not true. That's just not true. There's just, sure, there's pockets of this and that, and they took financial control and they worked and they built empires and they built giant cities and giant, yada, yada, yada. There is that. But there's also that with the Asian populations and every group that exists. Every group that exists has that. And it was weird for me when I saw Mr. Beast go and build all those water wells in Africa, and people were like, how dare you build water wells for, these people in Africa? You make Africa look like it's a third world nation, but look at our cities. It was just shocking to me that the culture we have in America is so anti-white. And I don't think that that's a good thing because I think it has affected the curve of the culture of whites to have children and come up with innovative ideas and try harder. Because that population at this point, especially during the past 4 years, was heavily put upon with a lot of racial tension, heavily put upon with financial requirements to pay for other groups. And I think that really messed up that population. I know it messed up the dating pool. I know it messed up the promotion pool. I know it messed up the getting a job at all pool. So I think what's happening is America kind of has to get on the right path to become innovative again, to create more jobs that hopefully we can give to disabled and retired. And the point I'm doing this video is to say, if we have simple jobs, fun jobs that we can set retired up on, that we can set disabled up on, going and working in a beautiful place at like a shop. And then at the end of the day, the retired person or the disabled person gets to go enjoy the beautiful area. If we have those jobs, can we please find a way to make more of those jobs? Because if we do, they will live longer. They will have a better overall experience as a human, which is like the standard of living, standard of life factor. So I guess the point I'm just trying to hammer home is that if you are disabled and you want to live longer, you got to basically find that purpose, whether it's a vocational one, you're doing a job, or you're donating your time, you have to find purpose. Now, some of you can't find purpose because your impairments are that severe. I totally get that. I work with those people every day. I work with more of those people than most people on planet Earth. As a result of that, any way that you can find purpose is crucial, absolutely crucial, because if you don't, statistics consistently show, corporate data consistently shows, right? Other countries' information and statistical actuarial information, it shows that you will pass away sooner. So just keeping that in mind, I want you to understand that that's kind of the direction I hope you go with the rest of your day, the rest of your week. As you close out 2025, what do you have planned for 2026? What things do you want to go ahead and get into? All right, with that said, Attorney Walter Hnot, I'm going to go ahead and do a little bit of work. I will catch you all a little bit later. You have a wonderful, wonderful day, and please be kind to each other. Please remember, I don't do Medicare stuff. If you have Medicare questions, give these guys a call. Also, I usually go live on Mondays and Thursdays. I fell asleep both nights for going live. I'm so sorry about that. I work really hard at the law firm. Finally, I did get caught up all of the 1 hour private consultations where you hire me for an hour and we do like an hour, 10 hour, 15 minutes. So I am caught up on those. But if you need one, you can just go ahead in the bio. There's a mini contract right there. I'll catch you a little bit later. Have a wonderful night. Rock and roll. Thank you so much. Attorney Walter Hnot. Bye-bye.